Hi, everyone. Good morning. Welcome here. How's everyone's reInvent going so far? All good? Awesome. This is SEC219. It's our 200-level breakout session. Build secure applications on AWS the well-architected way. I'm Reef D'Souza, a solutions architect, along with my colleague, Jeff Lombardo, both from AWS. And we're joined here by our friend, Josh McKitty, principal security architect from Zillow. Just a quick show of hands, how many of you are from a cloud security, application security background here? Okay. Software developers, data scientists, and DevOps, cloud ops. Okay. So it looks like we have a pretty decent mix over here. So to give you a quick roadmap for the session, since we're in Vegas, let's think of a card strategy as a good analogy, right? So first, I'll recount the journey of developing applications on AWS and the technological choices you have so you can build a strong hand. Next up, Jeff will talk about different patterns to actually play the game. And then finally, Josh will talk about Zillow's journey in scaling their AppSec efforts across different platform teams. So basically, he's going to give you some strategies for building good player habits to actually win the game. So what does application development on AWS look like? So to begin with, let's think about the decision you have made to build your application on AWS. You want to realize business value, and so you want to have a hardened environment on the cloud. This environment, you want to have security guardrails built in. And we call this a landing zone. So think of it as your data center on the cloud. Now, for those of you who don't know what a landing zone is, you can take a look at some of our design patterns for multi-account designs, or build one with a service like AWS Control Tower. So once you have that landing zone in place, next up is you want to put the plumbing and wiring in place. So in this example, I'm using some examples of AWS services. But you will have your own infrastructure in place for your CI/CD pipelines for developing and deploying your applications. So now that all of that's in place, let's get started with helping our developers. And before that, so what do modern applications on the cloud look like, right? We have seen a lot of changes over the years. So we have composable architectures, which are basically a series of API calls to different microservices. These can be using AWS services or other third-party services. Microservice-based architectures give your developers flexibility to choose, make technological choice in terms of programming languages, including using many open source packages. And this gives them the flexibility to build applications faster. And then you have new paradigm shifts, right? You are going to be considering containerized workloads or building serverless applications. And so this is where you're building the DNA of your business, or basically your business logic written into code. And so that kind of blend or blurs the line between what would be traditional InfoSec and AppSec, right? So now AppSec is also coming into the mix as you are using cloud services to build your applications. So how do you go about securing those applications? So to introduce a well-architected framework, we have 6 pillars, as you can see here. And it gives you a consistent approach for you as our customers, as well as partners in the room, to evaluate architectures and implement scalable designs. So the security pillar in the well-architected framework, it gives you a consistent set of guidelines and guidances to secure your data as well as assets on the cloud. And in April of this year, that's when we actually released some best practices related to application security. This includes coverage across people, process, and technology. So you might ask, so why is application security, or why did we make those decisions to include AppSec within the well-architected security pillar? So as organizations are moving to this more distributed ownership model, your key metric would be the speed of features reaching the hands of your customers. But you still want to make sure that the security bar has been maintained and ideally raised over time. But now that we talked about the flexibility of multi-account environments, having the ability to quickly experiment, developers and builders are going to have to make better decisions early on in the SDLC. You want to make sure that you're reducing the cost of delivery and increasing the quality of the delivered software. But as you might see your application portfolio expand because of this ability to innovate, your security humans you need to scale their efforts. So what you want to do is help these security humans, when it comes to the review stage, focus on more high-value activities. And then finally, because your applications are built on the cloud, you're going to also see voluminous data logs and be able to observe the behavior of your applications. So what you want to do is make sure that that feeds back into your security decision-making mechanisms, build automation, and then fine-tune your standards across the organization. So for lack of a better term, the most common buzzword you might have heard is like shifting left. So now we want to build security in, right? So let's consider the different phases of the software release cycle. So you have the authoring phase where you take into account your design and requirements. You think about your source phase where you want to do like some form of like code review and static analysis. Your build and test phases to do additional software composition analysis and penetration testing. And then finally, continuous monitoring of your application in production. So let's begin with the easiest part of this, right? The technology. So working backwards from the different personas, right? We saw a group of you are developers, some of you are security. So as we work backwards from a developer and a cloud ops perspective, the key thing the expectation here is you're building a secure application from the ground up and constantly detecting whether it is drifting from a secure state. And second, from a security and a compliance perspective, you want to make sure you understand what risk management looks like. The TAME acronym comes to mind, right? The transfer, accept, mitigate, and eliminate. So let's better understand our hand and what decisions we have to make to choose the technology. Some of you might have seen this hundreds of times, so a quick recap. This is our shared responsibility model for security on the cloud. And so in this model with AWS, security and compliance, so AWS takes care of security in the cloud, or security off the cloud. And this is our global infrastructure, our availability zones, our compute and storage platforms. And the portion in pink is your responsibility as a customer. That would be security in the cloud. So this would mean the decisions you make in terms of firewall rules to deploy, who should have access to data in terms of your least privilege management, whether or not to encrypt your data, and what operating systems to use. So this responsibility is a blurred line, as you can see from left to right, when you choose different services for purpose-built applications. So now let's go to the authoring phase. So in this phase, what we recommend is to start with threat modeling. So threat modeling is, you want to discover possible risks in the design phase. And when you are in the headspace of this design, you can make changes quickly and earlier. So think of it as security therapy, right? The questions you want to ask yourself as you get started with building your workload. So first, you want to know what are we building, right? So you're going to be doing data flow diagrams. You might have architectural diagrams with the components you have selected. And then you want to think of what can go wrong. Now, there's no canonical list of what can go wrong. And so this requires brainstorming between different personas. What we have seen from some of our mature customers who have used AWS and the cloud for a while is that they are implementing threat modeling on almost a per sprint basis, and some of them on a per milestone basis. So you can use like famous mnemonics such as STRIDE, or look at existing threat lists such as the OWASP top 10, the high trust threat catalog, MITRE's attack, or your organization's own threat catalogs. And then you want to think about the attacker, right? What are their motivations, goals, and their skill set? So that can like help you fine tune the possibility of exploitation. And so you don't want to get into this whole world of like Chicken Little where the sky is falling down and only think of what can go wrong. You want to actually make sure that this leads to some kind of action. So one is what you can control in terms of your code. And so what are you going to write in terms of secure code, right? You think about the traditional input validation, session handling, and so on. And then from the AWS services you have selected as part of this stack, what does that provide you in terms of security controls? So we at AWS have released an open source tool, AWS Threat Composer. So this comes up with a list of useful threats in context to the application that you're building. And it would provide you a set of remediation or mitigation guidelines to help you reduce your risk. It also provides insights in terms of, with interactive dashboards, so that you can measure the coverage of how much you have reduced your risk. So use a threat modeling exercise and Threat Composer to not only look at the mitigation steps, but also include your penetration testers and software testers as a part of the loop, so that you can build test cases to validate that the threat has been mitigated.
And when we are talking about threats, they are always related to one core component and one core function of your application. So what we want you to be able to understand is to have like a clear map onto what are the different families of threats that you can face and what are the different services that you can use in order to address them. So here, what we try to do, you might have seen this kind of slide before where we are splitting our portfolio into multiple objectives. So here we just try to unphase the different managed services that you can use in order to answer to those threats. Whatever that you are facing an identity and access management problem or like needing more detective control or some data protection function, this is like a way to quickly understand which services can help you there. And Riff, can you talk to us a little bit more about maybe Code Guru, Signer, and Code Whisperer?
Sure. So let's begin first with the developers themselves, right? So let's get to the application code. So from a developer's perspective, your goal would be, give me my preferred development environment. I want to build my application and ship to production as soon as I can without spending too much time on bug fixes and patching security issues. So basically improve my productivity. From a security persona's perspective, my goal is to reduce as much risk as possible, as early as possible. So basically match what I've determined as high-risk items from my threat model in that sprint and make sure that there's a security item in the backlog as we're building, so that at the end of the sprint, there's a tangible output in terms of security controls. So first up, let's help developers improve code quality before commit, right? So think of it as a security spell checker. So in this case, you can use our service, Amazon Code Whisperer, which is a machine learning-powered code generation service. And it works right from the developer's IDE. So all you have to do from a developer's perspective is download and install the AWS Toolkit IDE extension and start coding. So with Code Whisperer, it automatically analyzes your code and comments and can generate multiple code suggestions in real time. This can include entire functions and logical blocks of code. So many of you are security, so it's always about like trust and verify. So make sure that you're also reviewing the suggestions, and you might need to edit it to ensure that it meets your intentions in terms of business value, as well as from your security expectations. So next, you want to ensure that all the code that is going to production is trusted. So one of the things you can consider is code signing. So code signing is an industry standard that uses digital signatures to confirm that the code is unaltered and from a trusted publisher. So in this case, you can use a service, AWS Signer, which is our fully managed code signing service, to ensure the trust and integrity of your code. So with Signer, you can digitally sign packages that you intend to deploy in your Lambda functions as well as your IoT devices. And you can also use it to sign container images stored in a container registry, such as Amazon ECR. From a security administration perspective, it gives you a single place to define your signing environment, including the permissions needed in terms of IAM roles of who can sign the code and in what regions. Signer also manages the code signing certificates, public and private key pairs. And then finally, it gives you central governance capabilities in terms of the code signing lifecycle. So integration with AWS CloudTrail helps you track who is actually generating those code signatures and helps you meet your compliance goals. So we talked about trusted code that you have developed. So how about code that has been developed by third parties? So as a security architect, you want to ensure that all third-party code that's going to production has been vetted for vulnerabilities, and only approved packages and libraries are deployed into production. So in this case, you can use AWS Code Artifact, a managed artifact repository service. And it makes it easy for organizations to securely store, publish, and share your packages, including in a multi-account type of environment that is used in your software development processes. It works with commonly used package managers such as Maven and Gradle, NPM, Yarn, pip, and NuGet. Now, finally, remember I talked about composable architectures, right? So organizations are also leveraging a large number of SaaS applications in their IT portfolio. And these might be for business productivity or might be critical components of your IT infrastructure. These could be something like your identity providers, your SIEMs, or even your source code repositories. So these applications rarely work together natively, and your teams are typically spending a lot of time building those integrations, those point-to-point integrations that take time to develop, as well as you have the maintenance costs over time. So here's where you can use a service like AWS App Fabric that quickly connects these SaaS applications across the organization, and your security and IT teams can manage these applications using a standard schema and improve productivity. So we're not doing this alone, and so you can check out the App Fabric website to see which SaaS services are part of the initial portfolio, whom we're working with. From a security perspective, you are accessing normalized and enriched data logs provided by App Fabric, and you can stream this into the security tool of your choice with the ability to monitor the SaaS application from a security governance perspective. And from a productivity perspective, employees can have this single point of entry to complete their tasks and reduce time for jumping between applications. So now that we've built our applications and believe it to be secure, let's verify that the security properties we have expected are actually built in. So trust but verify, right? So in the source phase, organizations are typically implementing a static analysis check. And so in this case, you can natively use Amazon CodeGuru Security, which is a machine learning and program analysis-based service that finds security vulnerabilities that include your OWASP top 10 risks, CWE25, credentials that might be hard-coded in your code, as well as insecure use of the AWS APIs and SDKs. Now, at the build and test phase, here's where you are compiling code, performing unit testing, style checking, and you can also perform additional static analysis at this stage. What we also see and we recommend is to perform some kind of software composition analysis when it comes to the risks that are associated with your third-party vulnerabilities. And then finally, you want to perform some kind of dynamic testing in this case. You might be having a lot of might have deployed some of our partner services and tools or open source tools for dynamic testing. Natively, you can use Amazon Inspector. Amazon Inspector is our automated vulnerability management service that continuously scans EC2 instances, Lambda functions, and container workloads for software vulnerabilities and unintended network exposure. So you can try to validate whether there is, like, let's say, an EC2 instance with a vulnerable package, and if that package is reachable from the internet, thereby you can calculate whether it increases your risk or lowers it. It also offers the ability to export a consolidated software bill of materials across all Inspector monitored resources. And just a couple of days back, we announced that Inspector with code scanning for Lambda functions, provides code remediation guidance using generative AI and automated reasoning with in-context code patches for multiple classes of vulnerabilities. So now that we have looked at all those different pieces to stitch it together, you can see what it looks like in the context of a larger environment. And let's not forget the supporting cast of services that actually harden the environment. That would be your monitoring services in there, your encryption services, as well as your secrets lifecycle management services. So I apologize for the eye chart here, but this was how I wanted to summarize what it could look like with purpose-built services. And obviously, you might want to like substitute some of the native services with some of the partner products and tools that you have made investments in. Going back to the well-architected framework, we have covered now the best practices 2, 3, and 4, which include automating testing at different stages of development and release, performing regular penetration testing. So this would like tie back to the threat modeling that we talked about, make sure that there is some kind of test cases developed. And then finally, you are performing code reviews either manually or with the help of static analysis and using developer environment checks. So with that, now you know the strength of your hand. Let's look at some approaches to actually play the game.
Thank you, Rif. So, thanks to Rif now, I hope that you all understand that you need a pipeline. You need a pipeline to be able to build and check your application. You need to securely source all the elements that you need in order to compose those artifacts and those solutions and to deploy them securely. But we need some governance. We need the ability to be able to operate those elements. And we need this governance to be able to contribute to the different security objectives that you have. Like, be sure that you really control the configuration. It might be different depending the environment into which you will deploy this specific workload. Or being sure that there is no drift based on to the final state you want those different workloads to be on. Or finally, as you deploy the workload, being ensuring that you're also deploying guardrails into the different environment. So in order to help you with that, one thing that I want you all to keep in mind is the security reference architecture. Into the security reference architecture, what we are saying is that let's use AWS account as the highest guardrail in between your different workloads. And what we are saying is that, for example, for the security tooling, create a specific AWS account into a specific OU to be sure that only the security operator can have access to that. But here we are talking about application security. So this is a specific tooling. So new core services related to security equal new AWS account. The recommendations that we have for you onto that is that create an AWS account for those SDLC tooling, put it into the OU for security, and be sure that you can constrain the way that it can interact with all the other AWS accounts. So I said, build, check, but we need to securely source. Rif talked to us about how you can capture the different artifacts and elements that compose your application. That's great. But your application might be used by others within your organization. Who wants to reinvent the wheel? When someone else smart into the cubicle next to you might have a great solution that you can reuse for your own purpose. Or if you want to deploy a specific solution for maybe testing a new feature or troubleshooting some customer problem inside it. We need to be able to have some self-service capabilities about the different solutions that you have into your own portfolio. And that's great, because AWS Service Catalog is here for that. Once that you have created a solution, an admin and an owner for this solution can push it into a catalog for different other members of the different other line of business can use it. And those solutions might not be only based onto what you are creating inside your organization. You can also consume from solutions that are available into the AWS marketplace too. Okay. So Service Catalog really bringing you the agility, because at the end you have composed the solutions that you want to be available to your different line of business, the condition under which they can be used, maybe the condition onto which line of business can use it. And maybe you can provide, like into an ice cream shop, different flavors of those solutions that can be available. But you will also gain from governance. Because now, because it's a self-service mechanism, you will know who requested it, where it has been deployed, for which purpose, if it still exists or not. So you gain a lot onto the auditability and the ability to understand how much your solution is effective within your organization. And like I said, you can have into Service Catalog a lot of solutions. I talked about marketplace, I talked about your own solution, but knows that you can also onboard into the Service Catalog some AWS sample solutions that we are providing to you as open source solutions that you can make your own, or you can also have some solutions that are oriented around governance and conformance to standard and regulation. Like if I want to be able to deploy a stack which is PCI DSS compliant, I can use like a bootstrapping element into Service Catalog. Another process that I want to talk about is the separation of duties. It's great to have everyone playing into a sandbox, but I might want less people to be able to play into my QA environment, and surely no human allowed inside my production environment. So the pipelines that we've talked about, which is great for deploying those solutions, can also, depending on the environment it's targeting, having this understanding of the different guardrails that you want to implement over there. And two services that can help you with that are AWS EAM Identity Center, but also AWS EAM Access Analyzer. Access Analyzer will allow you to understand what are the mandatory rights that should be present into all the roles that can come packaged with your solution. And then you will provide them as permission set into AWS EAM Identity Center for the different population inside your organization that needs to have access to it. But as you can see, my pipeline still need to have access to production to be able to deploy to production or patch over there. So you need to be able to also draw a strategy and a process for accessing cross-account for this pipeline to be able to jump into the different environment. One rule that you have to keep in mind, EAM users and programmatic access keys are bad. Only temporary AWS credentials should be inside your strategy. And that's why we have expanded the portfolio of abilities for you to be able to acquire, to get those temporary AWS credentials issued to you. So you can use services like AWS STS, which is the older services that we have onto that, or EAM Role Anywhere, which can allow you from any environment which is non-AWS to still acquire some temporary AWS credential and act upon AWS resources. And that's very important for CI/CD pipeline, because those CI/CD pipeline might live into some ecosystems that you don't own, that you don't manage, that you only have the upper part. So thanks to that, there are more abilities now into the CI/CD pipeline, but we are also providing to you blog posts and patterns that you can use in order to be able to implement that. Okay, so CI/CD pipeline, lot of operation, but CI/CD pipeline may be different. You might have a pipeline specific for your dev environment. You might have a pipeline specific for your QA and your production. So now we need a meta pipeline. We need an ability to create new pipeline or to update those pipeline into a controlled way. So we are just like taking one step. We are coming up one level above that. So I want you to think about an ability to create those pipelines as service in order to be able to serve your different needs and to be able to orchestrate them more easily. And again, for this to be effective, you will need to understand where the different components that are used by your pipeline stand into this specific spectrum of accountability. Are they like fully managed service, or are they like third-party solutions that you deploy yourself onto some EC2 instance? Because that will change how the meta pipeline will have to interact with those. So once you understand all of that, you will be able to come back to the cloud adoption framework and tackle each of the specific chapters that will allow you to get more features onto the orchestration of those different pipelines. One of the last elements that I want to add is that a pipeline is doing action into your different AWS account. It's creating artifact, it's provisioning artifact. So it generates information at the CloudTrail and at the CloudWatch level. But those elements are very important when we are dealing with tracking the supply chain. So we want those elements to be able to flow to the security repository of events, because if we have to do some forensics, if we have to understand what happened inside the pipeline, you need to have all the elements and the event that will allow you to backtrack and to do those forensics. One other example of a process that you can deploy as part of a pipeline is software bill of material. Software bill of material are a very important artifacts that you can produce. And one big example that we can take for that is the Log4j vulnerability. So when the Log4j vulnerability became active, quickly you want to mitigate it. At some point you will want to remediate it, but at the end you will want to do a root cause analysis of why you were exposed to that. So for the mitigation, we help you onto that because we provided to you with some, for example, AWS WAF rules that protected you very quickly from the effect and the outcome of this vulnerability. We provided to you as a remediation element, like the hot patch for your JVM, that were allowing you to patch in production without rebooting the different workloads that you have. But the most important part that and the more complex one that you were facing is to understanding where you had to patch things. And that's why having software bill of material now can allow you to quickly understand where those vulnerabilities are located, because you know which artifact has been deployed where and if it includes or not the element at stake. And SBOM can allow you, on top of 0 days, to unlock insight by having very quickly a security posture for your organization, but also to unlock campaign. Adam told you during the keynote who has a Java application that he wants to upgrade. You need to understand in which version of Java your different workloads are deployed, or into Python as within this example. If you want to be able to trigger a campaign and to follow up onto where you are into the progress of this campaign. So through process, again, you can follow the guidance 5, 6, and 7, where inside the security application guidance, we are telling you to effectively centralize your source, deploy programmatically, and also treat your pipeline as a dedicated workload. But that's not the most complex part. Technology, process, it might be easy, but people, Josh, can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. Thank you, Jeff. So I'm Josh McKitty. I'm the principal security architect at Zillow. And before I kind of go into the people side of securing your applications, I want to just talk a little bit about who we are at Zillow. Is anyone here familiar with Zillow? Raise your hands. That's several people. Awesome. So at Zillow, our mission is to help more people get home to unlock life's next chapter. Many folks who have used Zillow are familiar with our services of providing home listings or our popular estimates. However, we have several services that go beyond. We connect buyers and sellers with agents within our local markets through our Zillow Premier Agent program. We provide financing services for potential borrowers through our Zillow Home Loans, and even have rental services for renters, property managers, and landlords through our Zillow rental service. With that, similar to other businesses who look to meet the customer needs quickly, we had the same challenges that other businesses have with the traditional journey of deploying applications and services, where security was seen as a gate or blocker to the process. Teams would ask for a security review, and then once that happens, maybe there's a significant design change related to that review. However, at this point, the product is not only ready to ship, but There's maybe a time restriction or a deadline to a product release date. So now the items that were under review could be fixed or maybe not fixed at all. And for us at Zillow, as we dug into these challenges with the teams and the developers that they were having, we learned that those developers and engineers, it wasn't about caring about security. They cared. We interviewed these teams and learned the specific pain points that they were having. Some of the challenges were lack of awareness of security issues related to their applications and services, competing business priorities in projects, resource constraints. Think of as other businesses have. You have a 10-person job, maybe with a 2-person team, and a lack of expertise related directly to security. Our teams wanted to learn more from us, but they didn't really know how the best way to do so. So we took all this feedback and came up with a mechanism we called the Security Champions Program. And the program, from the one-line description, is used to meet our teams where they're at in their security journey, using security experts to augment their current processes and procedures. The first element that goes into the Security Champions Program is leading with empathy. That means taking all of those challenges that the developers and engineers have as reasons why we're here, and extending a helping hand to get them back on track. We participate in the team's cadences. That includes their daily stand-ups, retrospectives, even sprint planning. We dive deep into their systems, in applications and code, in order to learn what protections fit best and how those protections would be implemented. We designed our Security Champions program as engagements. These engagements are tailor-made for each business line through a commitment from senior management. That commitment is documented as proof that both we as a security team and the developers and engineers that we're working with are both there to work to improve security during that engagement. So when we're engaged with a team during our Security Champions program, these are some of the tasks we perform. Analyze and update vulnerabilities in code. So I emphasize the and update part here, and maybe you're thinking, well, what does that mean? During our analysis, if there's an update opportunity that falls within our expertise as security engineers, we'll follow the normal update procedures that are established by the team to update the code, create a merge request, and follow it through. We don't go against their normal update procedures. We learn as much about how they perform work and lean in on these opportunities to perform those updates. Our goals with performing these updates are to show that it can be done. We also monitor the testing, we monitor the testing and performance results, and document our processes from that update so they can be repeated once the engagement is over. We also build and apply technical mechanisms for protecting their applications and systems. We look for opportunities to make security easier in an environment so the teams can concentrate on the challenges they have already. Any opportunity to update security through automation or through preventative or responsive controls are in scope for our engagements. We perform threat modeling of our applications and systems to assess potential avenues of attack and candidates for security enhancements. We follow up the threat modeling activities with penetration testing and red team activities to validate those models that we just created and recycle the results back into that model to have an accurate representation of what we're doing, and then direct those efforts to mechanisms and work that we can perform to reduce the most amount of risk. And finally, within all of these above, we use these as opportunities to train the developers and engineers on security best practices. This goes back to addressing the challenges of lack of security awareness and expertise. From our engagement so far, the top results that we've seen a direct decrease in code vulnerabilities via the program. We also see a reduction in unused resources and services. So not only do we improve security via a reduction in the systems that we have to protect, but there's also cost savings that goes right back to the folks that we're engaged with. Finally, we provide the documentation of threats through our models and the testing results to validate and support those models. Whereas service teams own the security of what they build, and our security team owns the overall security of the organization, the Security Champions program owns the mechanisms to bridge that gap between that in whatever part of the journey those service teams are. If you're reviewing the AWS Well-Architected AppSec best practices, we use the BP 1, 3, and 8 of this within our Security Champions program. Things like providing security information relevant to their applications, performing threat modeling and penetration testing, and augmentation of our engineers into their teams are all mechanisms that we use from the AWS Well-Architected Framework. So what goes into a security champion? This goes for both our security engineers that are assigned to a team during engagement and for developers and engineers who are, identified as security champions within our team, within their team. We look for a curious mindset, potentially stepping out of your comfort zone or traditional day-to-day activities to learn about something different. We look for someone detail-oriented, like not just someone who builds, but someone who excels at documenting and training how they build. We look for someone who owns it. If you're saying it's someone else's team responsibility when it comes to security, that would be difficult to operate as a security champion and within our program. We look for team members who are willing to lean in to help via their expertise and skills. And we look for folks who do the right thing, willing to pursue secure solutions and not make sacrifices on quality for ease. These align not only with what goes into our security champions, but our core values at Zillow as well. Finally, some of the lessons learned from our Security Champions program as we started it. Even though we educated developers on security, sometimes that proved difficult or didn't translate to actual results. Then that's okay, because that's where we use mechanisms in addition to our education efforts. Specifically for this lesson learned, it's important for us to not allow the fact that someone doesn't focus on security like we desire to get in the way of progress. That's where these mechanisms come in. Those include in preventative and responsive controls, some of which that Reef and Jeff just spoke about. Another lesson learned is everyone in our team, no matter what, is working towards the fact that customers are our North Star. We're all working towards the same goal. We always start with the point of empathy in the fact that we're there to help, not blame. And finally, as we ask our teams to focus on security, it's just as important for us to be willing to learn about the applications and systems that we have to protect. We need to learn about the technical designs, the challenges, and the experience of our users to tailor the protections we apply and the mitigation efforts that we work on. I want to thank you for letting me tell you my story, and I'm going to hand it back to Reef to talk about how you can get started.
All right, so to summarize, what you can do to get started. So as Josh mentioned, get closer to the application. Learn how it is built and why certain development decisions were made. I think he had emphasized that it's not only that they analyze for vulnerabilities, but they also update. So as part of building a security champions mechanism, see members of your team who are security minded that can then work towards taking on those security control backlog items we talked about that were identified in the threat modeling phase. In terms of working and partnering with us at AWS, make sure to reach out to your AWS account team. You have a solutions architect who could work with you, and work with them to help you outline and execute on your vision for building an AppSec program specifically for these workloads on the cloud. This can be via executive alignment, help from specialists such as me and Jeff. We have our training and certification teams who can come in and help you out with your certification goals. We have professional services engagements, so you can get some hands-on help from some of our specialists. And make sure, for those of you who have enterprise support, there are many services that enterprise support offer, including being able to review some of the findings from trusted advisor, or leading proactive type of mechanisms such as operational readiness review before your app has to go to production, making sure that you have taken care of your dotting the I's and crossing your T's. And then, I think end the year with evaluating your workload using the well-architected framework, or work with your solutions architect and schedule some time at the beginning of next year so that you have a roadmap and a backlog of security items that you can prioritize over the next year. And then empower your platform team through the mechanisms we called out. Foster that blameless culture. Josh hit the nail on the head when he talked about lead with empathy. Here are some resources you can use for further reading. We have linked to the well-architected security pillar. For those of you who are in a leadership position, we have a blog on for enterprise leaders and CTOs. And then finally, what Jeff had talked about in terms of reference architectures, use a security reference architecture for a hardened environment. For those of you who have privacy as a key focus for your workloads, we also have privacy reference architectures within that. And to close it out, make sure to save the date for our annual security conference, AWS Reinforce. This is going to be in June next year in Philadelphia. It's one of my favorite events of the year. So for those of you who enjoy security summit season and conference season, I hope to see many of you there. And with that, I thank you all for coming. Please make sure to complete the session survey in the app.